Good morning, everybody. Is this working? Good morning, everybody. If we could start coming to order, especially the officers at the back. And so welcome everyone today to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the West of England Combined Authority. In the event of a fire, we're not expecting a fire alarm, so please await direction from WECA staff, Combined Authority staff, who will assist with the evacuation, and don't return unless advised to do so by fire wardens. I've already done it right in my first sentence. We're going to try and use the words Combined Authority, not WECA, throughout this meeting if we can. May I remind you that this meeting is not being live streamed because about 15 minutes ago we realised that technically that's not going to happen. But it will be uploaded almost immediately this meeting has finished. So for that reason, please use your microphones when speaking so that you can be heard. Once you finish speaking, please press the button with the little human on it to prevent anything else being recorded and broadcast. There's a little bit of a shortage of mics. Last time we were passing the mics around. If you're going to do that, apparently you need to do that by lifting up the whole body of the machine. If you try and lift it up by the microphone bit, you're only going to break it. So, but it looks like at the moment we've got enough mics to go around. I just want to check that we're quorate.
No. But you can proceed if we need to and then ratify the business at the next meeting.
Okay.
It's not ideal, but it's better than cancelling the meeting.
Okay, so apparently we can proceed nevertheless and ratify it at the next meeting. And should we look, all the members of this committee are listed on the agenda. Do we have any apologies? So Councillor Stratfield James, we've also got apologies from Mayor Norris. Any other apologies? No. Do any members have any interests to declare about items on the agenda? One thing I have, yes.
I did notice one of the reports mentions the road I live on. So I live on Hengrove Lane, and it mentions that as having a road improvement on. It's a fairly invisible road improvement, but still, I thought I should declare it.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think I should declare I've got no interest in this meeting, but I do work for Sustrans as director of the National Cycle Network, and I haven't actually said that to all the people present before. I don't see any conflict of interest on this agenda, or indeed pretty much any agenda, because I'm not involved in the West of England. It's a UK-wide role. But I thought it was just worth saying that in the interest of complete transparency, that I do work for a transport organisation based in headquartered in Bristol. The minutes of the meeting held on 8th of October are attached. Would the committee like to agree the minutes as a correct record?
Chair, I wish to put an amendment to the minutes because I noticed under item 7, public forum, it didn't include the fact that I was present and did try to speak and was stopped. I had a suggested addition to the minutes, which was simply Councillor Tim Kent was also present to speak to his statement, but was advised that this was not allowed under public forum. I've kept it as bland and as factually accurate as I could.
Could we add to that, Tim was not allowed to speak as part of the public forum, but was invited to speak at item 11 and started the debate at item 11 on the subject?
Well, I think that would imply that I'd agreed to that, which I had not, and I did object, and I do still believe that actually the ruling was a breach of the Constitution, as the monitoring officer sitting next to you is aware. But rather than get into that, I thought I would suggest a bland addition to the minutes.
And I was just going to suggest that you were invited to speak to item 11 on the subject. I think that's actually correct.
It is only partially correct because there was more I wished to cover, which could not be covered under that item.
We'll try and get something together and make sure. Well, can we actually minute that? what you said, you're invited to speak as part of the preventive forum, but were prevented from doing so, but did cover part of his statement at item 11.
Well, that's not my proposal.
Okay. Would anyone else like to comment on this, or should we try and find a form of words and get them agreed at the next meeting instead and defer these minutes for the time being? Let's do that. Okay, Chair's announcements. I'm satisfied that North Somerset Council members are here. Welcome to Councillor Nigel Ashton. And as far as I'm concerned, by convention, they have a speaking role at this committee if they so wish. We have at our last meeting, we agreed that we would have a training programme for audit and scrutiny members from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. A firm costed package is being sought. We should have details of that in the next day or so. It's likely to be a day's commitment for members of scrutiny or audit. I don't believe it's essential for people to come along, and it will be repeated for accessibility and probably recorded also, so people can watch it back if they're not able to make it. The other thing is we will be collecting feedback. So the Chair of Scrutiny has a slot on the Combined Authority Committee agenda on Friday. We'll be collecting feedback as we go. I think it would be really worth being very explicit. If there's anything you think is worthy of specifically being part of that script for Friday, that you say so at the time and maybe summarise what we might say. I've asked Emma, who's is Emma online? Yes. So we've got Emma online taking minutes to keep a tally, and we'll try and round up the ideas at the end during agenda item 10. But I am trying to keep it to no more than a side or maybe 2 sides of A4. So it's quite high level feedback. But if we do want to do that, then please let's do that tally as we go. And also a reminder to Emma that she's taking minutes, that she is very welcome to clarify anything as we go and get the minutes right first time. So if the minute taker does want to clarify things, then I've given her explicit permission to ask how we might minute something. We've got 10 questions submitted by members of the public. Written responses have been provided and are available on the website. I think it's safe to say that an awful lot of them are about buses. And I think that's something that may form part of our feedback at the end of the meeting, buses and public transport. Statements been received. I'm going to take them in the order in which they were received. So Dave Bridgewell, you've got 3 minutes. The microphone's on its way, and I'm putting on a stopwatch.
Can I just make one point on Equalities Act? Having no IT working, having no recording of these meetings prevents disabled people in the rural areas and people of Bristol from watching this meeting. A number of my colleagues, Bristol's Bid Equality Forum, South Gloucestershire Council area, wanted to tune in. They can't. This is the second time this has happened, and we really must sort this. South Gloucester Council goes online, Gloucestershire County Council goes online, Somerset goes online, Baines is online for meetings.
Dave,
just make that point. It just really is an equalities duty thing.
My little chair's script here says it is being broadcast, but unfortunately there's technical issues at the last minute. It is a very firm intention to do that, and this will be uploaded immediately.
It would also be useful if people can also zoom in and speak, like they can at Gloucestershire, Somerset and South Gloucestershire Council meetings, because they do that.
Would you like to start your statement?
Yeah, thank you. Just the equalities bit. Yeah, buses. Well, the first thing I wanted to say on the Bristol Bath Road corridor, Secretary of State has made it very clear, whatever Paul Beltrop says on BBC News, Secretary of State is not funding a road through Brislington, and you have to make a submission. This is Mark Harper in 2027. So it's not part of the money you have now, which is for walking, cycling and public transport. I can get that letter for you from the Department for Transport if WECA needs that letter with North Somerset. Just be absolutely clear what that money's for. On buses, well, 5 routes have been put back since we last spoke, mainly in South Gloucestershire, mainly with the work of South Gloucester Council and Bob behind us. And we've had some work going on excellently in North Somerset, putting routes back through Yatton and around Weston-super-Mare. But the areas of Bristol where we have social deprivation, social inclusion and social justice, Ashton Park Estate, Ashton Vale, Albury Court, parts of Winterbourne, Brislington have no bus services. The only place that's in the same league as us is Stoke-on-Trent. We've got elderly people relying on taxis to go and meet Dan to make it clear at Sparks, because they all rang me, even though I was in hospital, to tell me they were going there. They were taxis. We didn't even go to them. And I'm the bus rep, and I feel embarrassed by this on your advisory panel. We should be going to these working class communities and seeing their views, not just going to areas where buses still exist. So that's my first point. Social justice, social inclusion, public equalities duty, this authority going out to the communities where we have hard to reach communities. So we need to integrate the buses. We need to bring more buses back. We need to sort the network out. That's what this authority is for. It's not here for much else. It's public transport, skills, and a bit of tourism and education. And that's it, really. That's what it's set up for by government. So we need to make it work. And I'm just asking, the bus service improvement plan needs to work for communities, and it's not at the moment. We have 40 communities without buses, and that's not acceptable. Malcolm's doing an excellent job on rail. Rail is coming on really great. We're getting the lines in, the stations, the planning permission. So rail is a good news story. Bus is still a very difficult story, and integrating the two. But you know, we haven't gone online. We haven't spoken to all these hard to reach communities. We held a Somerset Bus Partnership meeting. My colleague here will speak later. We had about 80 people online from the southern part of your area, including South Bristol, really upset about the level of bus services in this area. Council officers were present on that call. I just hope we can actually make sure we bring these buses back, we get these services running. And just on franchising, great, it's going to take 4 years. Andy Burnham's doing it. Municipalisation, 4 or 5 years. What the people of Greater Bristol, North Somerset, South Gloucester, North Somerset needs to become a member, and the Bath area is bus services, and they need them put back by this authority. And it was very disappointing we never got any extra money in the latest round when some authorities got top-ups and extra money, even though they hadn't bid. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Well done, Dave, and thank you. Noted. Next is Mrs. Bobby Oliver. So you've got 3 minutes starting now.
On behalf of the Reclaim Our Buses campaign and Hub's Mobility Advice Service, West of England, I'm very pleased to hear that Dan Norris has commissioned a report into bus franchising for the Combined Authority to be published early next year. Could the Scrutiny Committee ensure that this happens as soon as possible and that it does not just become a way of keeping us, the campaigners, at bay? I would like to remind the committee that the bus system as it is does not provide any sort of transport equity, contribute to well-being or carbon neutral future. There are still areas of the Combined Authority without any form of bus service, including inner city areas, and those that have been provided to plug the gap are not well publicised. They do not operate in the evenings or at weekends. Many people are forced to have to use their own cars, even if they don't want to, thus continuing the reliance on fossil fuels. A usable public transport system would really contribute to the aim of net zero carbon emissions. The suggestion of a new board to be set up in the West of England, similar to Transport for London, with the powers and resources to run an efficient and effective regional public transport service, is a really good one, as long as it integrates community transport and demand responsive services so that the region is joined up. The board should also include representation from all disability campaign groups to ensure that our needs and wishes are prioritised over profit for shareholders.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure that bus franchising is officially on the Combined Authority's agenda on Friday, but given the level of interest in the region, I think it's something Emma, taking the minutes, keep looking online behind me because she is there somewhere, but I think it's something I'd like to have as part of the feedback from this committee, that we've heard that people are concerned that this is if franchising is going to be followed through, that it's a genuine step in the first direction, not just a way of managing campaigners. So I think that's something that would be worth saying, that has come from the public forum at this meeting when we feedback on Friday. Thank you, Bobby. Francis Bennett.
Hi, so so my name's Francis. I'm a doctor living and working in St George in East Bristol. I guess I'm also a member of a campaigning organisation, a healthcare organisation called MedAct. Our fundamental ethos is health workers for health justice. It's clear to us as healthcare professionals that poor public transport in our city serves as a serious injustice to the health of all those who live here. We see the consequences of this every day, and I wanted to share with you some of our experiences. Dr. Hattie Nicholas, who can't be here today, a previous member of our group and a doctor at the Bristol Children's Hospital, told us that on high pollution days in Bristol, there are 4 more cardiac arrests, 9 more admissions for stroke, 12 more children attending with asthma symptoms, of which 5 will have to stay in hospital, plus 4 more adults attending hospital with asthma. Living next to roads in inner city areas is more likely to produce symptoms. To this end, she highlighted a 2019 report from the Docklands Youth Centre in St Paul's, which stated that 47% of our young people suffer with asthma. Compared that with a national average of about 10%. This is absolutely shocking and should make all of us here as adults in this room deeply ashamed. This year, Clean Air Day was on the 15th of June, and to mark it, we joined members of the Bristol Clean Air Alliance in Broadmead for a climate clinic. We spent that day talking with members of the public about their experiences of air quality in Bristol and what we need to do about it. Whilst people may disagree on topics like the clean air zone, there was almost unanimous agreement on 2 things: just how bad the air quality and buses are in our city. A common response I heard was, I know air quality is terrible. I know I should use my car less, but how can I do that if I can't rely on the buses? If you haven't spoken to someone who relies on buses, then I urge you to. They are angry, they are depressed, and most people I spoke to have given up hope that things will ever get better. If they can, they use a car. If they can't, they continue to suffer, missing doctor's appointments, getting fired from work for being continually late, spending hours a day waiting for buses that never come. One absolutely heartbreaking story I heard was from a man who said, "This is the first time I've been to town in months. I live alone, and being in town is often my only real connection to the outside world. But recently my bus route was cut, and because of my mobility problems, the only way I can get to town now is by taxi. I can't afford taxis." We need you as our representatives to truly grasp just how important this is.
30 seconds.
I grew up in Bristol, and even as a kid, I always knew to avoid taking buses if I could. 20 years later, little of any substance has changed. It is glaringly obvious that the current model is not working, and if you look at cities like London and now Manchester, the solution is equally obvious. You have the power to shape what will happen next, and I urge you to use that power to back public control of our buses. Thank you.
That was perfect timing. Well done, Francis. I think we'll add to the feedback from this committee to the overall committee that it also should be seen as a public health and equity issue. I think that's probably, if we're trying to summarise it briefly. Right, now, Mandy, welcome. You're not obliged to read out your statement in full. If you want to summarise it, you can do that as well if you wish.
Thank you. Mandy Parry from Transform Bristol. In recent months, several local bus services across the city of Bristol, crucial to the communities they serve, have been lost. A prime example of this is the 52 bus serving Bishopsworth, Highridge, Withywood and Hartcliffe. It's been run by numerous operators throughout the years. It's often been at risk, having to be rescued time and again, but it sadly ran for the very last time on Friday, the 1st of September. The number 52 bus linked the city centre, Asda, Bedminster, the crematorium and the Imperial Shopping Centre. Initially, when the South Bristol Community Hospital opened, it also served that hospital, but this crucial destination stopped some time ago. I can't make sense how this was allowed to happen. Highridge, Withywood, Hartcliffe are some of the most deprived areas in the country, let alone Bristol. There is no viable alternative bus that is near enough for many residents, including the elderly and disabled, to access the amenities mentioned. And of course, many of these residents do not have access to private vehicles. A new initiative, the Youth Zone, is due to open next year opposite the Imperial Shopping Centre, and young residents from the area covered by the 52 bus will not be able to access this service. At a time when we're being informed that we must rely less on cars and use public transport, walk or cycle, it seems incredible that the bus services in the very areas that rely on them the most are being slashed without any consultation. Slashed because it would appear simply because they cannot run at a profit. The Department for Transport states that local authorities have a statutory duty to consider whether a service is deemed to be socially necessary. WECA receives 1.1 million annually to subsidise socially necessary bus services. I don't believe anyone could reasonably argue that any of the bus services removed from operation in Bristol in recent years are not socially necessary. And as far as I'm aware, this has not been tested by any impact assessments or meaningful public consultations being carried out prior to those services ending. The local communities of Bristol who've been left high and dry without their treasured bus services deserve much, much better. WECA must do better for them and for the future generations of bus users. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. That's a very powerful statement. And there's several councillors here from South Bristol who will be concerned about accessibility to the hospital in particular and the new youth zone. Robbie, 3 minutes, starting now.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. I have a suggestion that I want this committee and this Combined Transport Authority to consider, firstly, and I secondly want to reinforce the points already made in the room with respect to both health outcomes and in terms of what Ms. Parry was just saying. We've had a very good idea, which I like, okay, which is the birthday card, okay? A 1 month long valid bus pass for anybody to use buses in their birthday month. Great idea, okay? Should help in terms of actually trying to encourage people to consider using the bus instead of private vehicles. And I really appreciate the ability to actually have this. But I'd like to ask you, what is there for me? Okay, I've got a disability bus pass. Okay, there's other people in this room who have got similar bus passes. There may also be people in this room who have old age persons bus passes. Okay, and we don't have any need for these bus passes. And it's asking me, why are you investing in the able-bodied, the young, and people like that, and not in us? Okay, I think this is a very serious thing that you need to actually consider whether or not you're actually discriminating against me and older people. Okay, and I'd like to ask you to look into ways whether or not that single day out of 6 that we don't have a valid bus pass for could actually be supplementarily funded from any available funds, because I certainly would like to have a bus pass that, like in other areas, like in London, like in Manchester, like in the West Midlands, all of whom have effective combined and or metropolitan and transport authorities who give bus passes which are valid around the clock, every day of the week, and not just at the weekend. Many people have mentioned repeatedly over the last few years is the fact that quite often we have to go to the doctors early in the morning, or we have to go to work. We do work, some of us, okay, and we're not able to use our bus passes for that. I'd like to be economically contributing to this city and this region, but I can't really afford to actually do that with my bus pass. And I have to have that ability to be able to travel to work in a reasonable and inexpensive manner. I could do it if I worked part-time, but I don't want to work part-time. I want to work full-time, and I want to make sure that I can give the benefits that I have to other people.
Thank you, Robbie. That's your 3 minutes. I think it is worth noting that some of the provisions, I think, of the local free bus pass go beyond the statutory minimum. So, but maybe still not far enough. Thank you. And finally, Rosa. Rosa, you here? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in a strange position in as much as I actually come from across the border, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to represent the Wells, Cheddar, Axbridge Bus Users Group. I am a steering group member of the Somerset Bus Partnership. I am also here today representing the Somerset Catch the Bus campaign. I would like this West of England Scrutiny Commission. I had hoped the Mayor was here because my message is mostly addressed to him, but I'm sure he will get the message. I would like this Scrutiny Commission to ask North Somerset Council and you as the Mayor Combined Authority to ask Mr. Norris and to ask North Somerset Councillor Hannah Young, the Transport Executive on that side, to urgently restore the 126 bus service from Wells Bus Coach Station to Easton, Westbury Submendip, Draycott, Cheddar, Axbridge, Winscombe, Banwell, Locking via Hutton, Western Supermare Hospital and Western Supermare Bus and Rail Station. We were promised this service in discussions between North Somerset Council and where West of England Mayoral Combined Authority that this would start in October 2023. There were 2 bidders and possibly 3 bidders for that route. Things haven't progressed. Young people, older people, people who cannot travel to Western Supermare for college, for hospital appointments, for leisure facilities, or catch any bus or train heading towards Bristol City Centre or the University of UWE, or towards Wells bus coach station and via that connecting corridor to Shepton Mallet, interchange at Midsummer Norton, Westfield, Radstock, Peace Down St John's bus coach station. The 172, 173, 174 and the 376 to Chewton Mendip, Farringdon, Guernsey, Clutton, Pensford, Whitchurch, and many
30 seconds.
Including the Bristol Templemead station. Please, gentlemen, I ask this committee, would you be kind enough to ask the West of England Scrutiny Commission to get Councillor Hannah Young, Mayor Mr. Daniel Norris, Councillor Mr. Mike Bell, and Councillor Mike Digby of the Transport Executive of Somerset County Council and his officers, please, we've missed 2 terms of college. Can we have this as soon as possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. I think it's worth saying that Mayor Norris isn't here. He sent his apologies. If people want to submit their statements in exactly the same way or in another form, then you have until Thursday noon to do that in the same way that you did that for this meeting. And then you'll have the right to come and make those statements at the actual committee meeting in front of all the 4 leaders of the council. So it's a disappointment that Mayor Norris has not been able to come today, but you do still have a chance to address directly on Friday, if deadline noon, I think, on Thursday. Yeah. Should we move on? So Dan, the monitoring officer, you're going to introduce the report. This is effectively where we look at the review of items to be considered by the West of England Combined Authority on Friday.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, as is customary, as you've just said, the committee has an opportunity to go through each of the items that will be presented to the main committee and to put forward any observations or comments at this time. So I'll hand back to you, Chair, and I assume you're going to just trot through them one at a time and take comments.
So I would be interested in the committee giving me any ideas here of the particular ones that we'll try and do them all the items justice, but if there's any particular items on the agenda that they're wanting to give any extra attention to. Is anyone sort of particularly burning to talk about any particular items on this agenda? just so we can manage the agenda? No, okay. I mean, okay, all right. Let's get on with it then, shall we? I guess future for West and BSIP are going to be two of the hotter topics. So, so looking at this, the first one is looking at the investment fund programme. Would it be helpful if I've got a list here of who authored the report, Pete Davis? Would it be helpful if you came and gave us a very brief summary of what's in there, and then we can go into the meat of the report? So, Pete, would you like to come up? Could you speak for 2 or 3 minutes just to give us all an overview and any salient points that you'd like to draw out, please, Pete? Thanks.
Yeah, so this report provides an update of the investment fund programme and the awards being made through this report and covered elsewhere on the agenda. There are 3 recommendations within the report. The first relates to formalising the repayment arrangements for the repayable land acquisition and development infrastructure funds based upon the long stop dates for these repayments, and this allows those funds to be added back into the headroom now that there is confirmation of their repayment, which adds a further 9.7 million to the headroom. The second relates to a walking and cycling scheme on the edges of Thornbury, Groves Emrose to Gillinstall corridor, and the recommendation here is the award of £50,000 to do further design and consultation work, and the delegation of the approval of the outline business case to the directors of infrastructure. The third recommendation relates to the development of a regional evidence portal to provide a platform to provide evidence and data to partners, focusing initially on data evidence. And the recommendation there is the award of, as I say, the £50,000. Overall, the impact of the decisions and changes set out in this report and in the delivery assurance report, which talks about changes to existing schemes within the programme, increases the headroom to 12 million overall. The planned work on the regional strategy and investment priorities set out in the transformation programme report on this agenda will inform the use of this headroom going forwards. That was it from me, Chair.
Would anyone like to make any comments or any questions for Pete? I'll take that as a no. Well done, Pete. You're up for the next one as well, aren't you?
I am, yes. Shall I carry on?
Moving to delivery assurance. So how we're keeping track of the programme.
So this report sets out the process of managing schemes that are already approved within the investment fund and the CRSTS programmes. It provides an update on measures to seek to improve and drive delivery across these programmes. And there are 3 main actions being undertaken. The first is the work of the Programme Review Board, which brings together directors in the Combined Authority and the unitary authorities together with the Section 151, the finance officers. The second is a project line-by-line review being undertaken for which challenge sessions, review sessions are being held across the portfolio, planned to conclude this month with a view that a report on those actions comes back to the next meeting of the committee. And the third is a series of project health checks being undertaken by the Infrastructure Directorate, of which 50 projects have already been through that process to date. The recommendation within the report is to approve a number of change requests set out in Appendix 1. That provides some detail of the nature of the change and some explanation of the reason for the change.
One of my observations on this is there's an awful lot of projects being delayed. And does that cause us any concern?
There are a number of change requests reported. Encouragingly, it's less than at the last meeting, although I suppose that doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but it does. The direction of travel seems positive, and clearly those actions I mentioned we very much hope will improve delivery. I think there are still some issues, particularly around early stage development and mobilisation and resourcing seems to be common trends if you look across the change request. So there is work to do, but I think that we are seeing some improvement compared with the previous cycle.
And it seemed that, like you say, quite a lot of the it was fairly common themes emerging from the kind of reviews that have been undertaken. Is there sort of maybe something that will be done to try and raise standards or raise sort of, some sort of training program for people who are delivering on behalf, either for WEC or on behalf of WEC?
I mean, Malcolm might want to chip in, because this is particularly in the infrastructure space, and there are a number of learning points that have already been taken around the way that we do things. Standards, processes, training, the skills of the people running these projects. So yes, I think there is already some learning with those health checks undertaken to date.
Happy to chip in, Chair. For members, Malcolm Parsons, I'm Head of Capital Delivery for the Combined Authority. As we've seen in the report, there are some changes in the forecast going forwards. That has been a combination of increased rigour and oversight within those projects and programmes, which has led to some movement in those timescales, which we can anticipate, as normally is the case when you get into further detail on projects. We have also joined as a corporate member of the Association of Project Management, and we saw them come to a recent event for us, and we're running a training programme through that group. We're working with our unitary authority partners as well in that space, and we're having joint training sessions with project and programme managers within the unitary authority, so it's not just isolated to combined authority. We recognise there's a suite of other improvements to be done, and the Director of Infrastructure, working alongside these equivalent officers within the unitary authorities, has a programme for future investment and change over probably the next 12 months.
Thank you. That sounds like a very worthwhile investment, and giving everyone a common language and a common framework is only got to be to the good. Any other? Tim?
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions. The PRB, the Programme Review Board, I think you briefly mentioned some of the members, which I couldn't see in the report. So could you just go through what is the membership of the Programme Review Board, please?
Yeah. The membership of the Programme Review Board are the directors of infrastructure, business and skills, environment. However, the portfolios fall across the combined authority and the unitary authorities, and the council section 151 officers, and Rachel is the combined authority section 73 officer.
Thanks. And you brought forward some change requests. What's the level of delegation, and at what point do you need to bring forward a change request to the main committee?
There are a series of delegations, and we've been reviewing those thresholds to make sure decisions are taken at the appropriate levels, and we're not hindering schemes progress by waiting for committee approvals. I think there's a revision to the delegation, for example, in the transport update, to try and make it more efficient to deliver the CRSTS programme within the new rebaselining proposed in the report. So there are a set of delegations. I think only one change in this current cycle was delegated to directors. I think there is scope for more to go through that delegated process, though.
Thanks. And I guess my final question is, what political oversight is there to this programme? Because although you listed out a large amount of officers from different authorities, what involvement is there of the political leadership of either this authority or the other authorities in the delivery of these programmes?
The schemes that are delivered by the councils obviously come through the council's own processes, and a change request needs to be signed off by the council section 151 officer, confirming the level of corporate ownership of the process of change. Clearly, the changes go through committee and have scrutiny and have decision making in that way. So there's political input at that level to the process.
Any other questions? Ben?
So I think, Ed, I'd echo what you said at the beginning, that I noticed a lot of delays to the projects here. I'm quite interested to note that on the change requests, there's comments around revised scope, delayed starts. rates of delivery slower than anticipated, delay across milestones, duplication of milestones. So it's quite good that we're getting an idea that there'll be an upskilling of resource in terms of how this is all reported. But in terms of a committee making a decision on these change requests, I would have liked to have seen a bit more information or referencing to further information about why those delays were introduced. Because if I was taking that decision, I wouldn't be particularly confident in the decision I'd be taking based on the information presented.
So on the one hand, we could argue that I think it has been argued here that this assurance is actually outing things earlier, and it's kind of a good thing, and it's almost better that we know what the problems are early. But on the other hand, it would be useful, I think, what you're saying is to have a bit more understanding of the reasons behind them, and particularly common themes, and on a line-by-line basis to be clear about why the problems have come out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if there's a project delay, it'd be useful to see some kind of project exemption report and things like that. If it's gone into exception, to see that project report referenced in the material to delays in milestones and delays in delivery. So if the project's in an exception, we know why and how it's got there.
Thanks, Ben. I think any other questions about this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just, I mean, they're really good points, aren't they? So there's a lot more detail and information that sits underneath these that go through the various officer groups, and we're trying to sort of balance that, you know, how much you put into the committee. But we'll do a bit more. I think it's important we reflect on that. One of the things I just wanted to say was the issue on delays, and these are challenging, both, you know, the projects we're doing in the combined authority, and indeed, you know, the many projects that are, you know, led by our, you know, the unitary authorities that we work with as well, really. And that's why the improvements, the training we want to get, you know, embedded more are across all groups, because it's no good us doing it in the combined authority or Bristol doing it or South Gloss or Baines and not in the other areas. So we've got to get everybody's standards to improve, to continue some of the improvement work that's gone on already. One of the key points that always comes up at our committee is the so what question. So if you're late and you delay, and some of that can be genuine delay and it's, you know, driven by the market, but some of that can also be because people aren't doing as well or as things are as fast as they could. So the robust challenge of the programme review body is to try and out some of that, and therefore there should be occasions where the answer is no. You know, that there ought to be some robust challenge on the money being allowed to go forward. Now that gets very difficult, because you're then into the territory of, you know, slowing or even stopping particular programmes. But there's certainly been discussions, and our Mayor Norris has pushed hard for that on the, you know, if you don't deliver, why should the funding be tied up, and why should that sort of slow response be allowed to use? And that's a challenging issue to me, as well as to the in the combined authority role, as well as to the unitary authorities, and that's something we've not been able to get over. You recall that the discussions at the committee, or you may recall the discussion at the committee last year around if funding is not used, then it should be withdrawn and used for other purposes, and that is a perfectly normal process that many organisations go through. But it's challenging because these projects are important to the region and to, you know, different authorities in different ways. The other area we've looked at, and we haven't come up with an answer yet, and that's partly because I think we need to do the improvements first and see where we land after that, is around other incentives you could apply for people. I don't think we're quite in the incentives regime yet. I think we need to get our standards up first and then come back to that afterwards.
I think it might be also worth mentioning that I'm just drafting a letter which I'm happy to share around this committee to the chairs of Scrutiny and the unitary authorities, because in some cases the unitaries have been delegated or commissioned to deliver projects. And I think we need to make sure that we're coordinated and across the unitaries, particularly where they're delivering things. And if there's problems with delivery there, then we need to share that information between us. So I've drafted a letter. I'm happy to share that around for comment, so that we can assure ourselves that where there's unitary authority delays, that they are being looked at and picked up. Any other questions? So I'm going to summarise this from my feedback now quickly, and invite any comment on that. We're pleased to see that capacity building is happening across both delivery and project staff. It's good to see that there's more rigour and it is surfacing problems early, but there are quite a few problems. We'd like to see where there's any common issues. There is a delegation to officers for much of these changes, and that might involve a lack of political oversight. So we would like to see the balance of the detail got about right in terms of what's not too much information, but enough information to identify themes and problems. And I'll also mention that we'll be looking to coordinate scrutiny across the sub-region. Is that okay? Do you think that picks up on your point enough, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of debating in my head whether I'd actually like to see some kind of, if this is a strategy of work across the whole authority area, it'd be really interesting to see how all that delivery interlocks with one another. Yeah. So this is it's a good report. It's a detailed report, but it is a textual report. So if there are views or delivery tools available, like presenting milestone views for all these projects and what's being delivered, you could see on a simple side of A4 in terms of what milestones are late, what's been moved, what's been shifted, what's been brought in. That type of context of delivery across the authority would be really interesting to see. And if there's some kind of portfolio manager in the authority who's looking after that, then I'm sure they'd like to see that too.
I think that might be Pete, isn't it? So if we could have some sort of dashboard, single side of A4 type dashboard. And I think the other implicit thing that you're saying is actually we might be wanting to look at capacity across the region for things like contractor availability and so on, to see when the big programs are coming and make sure that they're not competing against one another with contractors. So kind of program management, particularly looking at at the program level. Shall we move on? Next up, we've got, thank you, Pete. Next up, we've got the Climate and Ecological Strategy Action Plan update. So, Roger, would you like to come and give us a high-level summary, just a few minutes, and then we'll field some questions.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So yeah, very quickly, the Climate and Ecological Strategy and Action Plan paper to committee this month covers a 6-monthly progress update. And in the annex, it has 105 actions linked to the strategy and the progress update on those. And also bringing together 4 other recommendations in addition to that, which is about recognising the scale of challenge around the 2030 strategy target, endorsing a point that we've discussed at Scrutiny previously, and an action that is in the Climate and Ecological Strategy to integrate a framework for ensuring that climate and nature is part of everything that we do as an authority. This is something I think all of the unitary authorities are tackling at the moment. It's a really difficult job, and I think we're all in slightly different places, but I think recognising the importance of it in the committee paper is important. And then 2 points around delegation of authority, which I think we've picked up in the previous item, but the importance of getting our process working as efficiently as possible so we can move these projects along.
So, thank you. Any questions? Katie?
Yes, sorry, thank you for that. I mean, just a question on this business of embedding climate and nature considerations into, the delivery decision-making authority-wide. Obviously, great idea. And forgive me if I've just missed this, but, and this, in fact, the thinking was provoked by something specific around the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure plans. But generally, it feels to me that carbon metrics, I mean, they need to be really kind of specific carbon metrics, eventually need to be part of this story of embedding. How can you embed if you can't measure? And I know it's not straightforward, and I know it depends on the carbon metrics capacity of the unitary authorities, you know, which is also a work in progress. But it just seems to me that in the context of distancing the authorities' aspirations from what appears to be happening at the national level, I mean, we should double down on the embedding and on the progress. If we're not going to abandon that 2030 target for now, recognizing it's going to be difficult, surely we want to be able to measure it and to be communicating that story as clearly as possible to people.
Thank you. Yeah, great point. I totally agree. I think something that came out of the we got Climate and Nature Action Panel, which many of the council leaders attend last week or the week before last. We discussed that very point about the regional leadership. I think it's essential that carbon metrics are part of what we do. So, the integration is difficult, as you say, but it's something that's a work in progress. Thank you.
Tim.
Hi, just a quick question. Probably one of the fastest areas we could decarbonise our economy would be around power, seeing as there are already clear and economically fundable solutions out there, solar, wind, tidal. Where are we with decarbonising our current sort of, I guess, our electricity grid for this region? And how much further do we need to go? As in, will we have that fully decarbonised by 2030? I realise there's other challenges, transport, and of course that then impacts on energy. I was just wondering where we are as a region.
So obviously it's a national transmission network. And so actually that's one of the success stories, I think, of the last kind of 10 or 15 years in terms of the decarbonisation of national generation. In terms of the regional story, actually that's a lot more complex in terms of our access to that grid, in terms of the demands we're going to be placing on it, but also the generation we're going to be producing from the region. It's very live and a key risk for the region in terms of the national transmission network and how we can access that. It's one of our top risks as we see as a region in terms of tackling the climate emergency. Ongoing discussions with National Grid about what they can do, and they're very active discussions. National Grid and Ofgem are both very active in trying to work out how they unblock that barrier, because at the moment we're looking at a up to 10-year delay in terms of being able to access new energy over 1 megawatt. So it's a big challenge. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but absolutely there has been huge shifts in that area.
But just to follow up what you just said, are you sort of saying that in this region, at the moment, the National Grid can't take on new energy generation over 1 megawatt?
That's been the national statement around what National Grid can do. And it's all about our infrastructure, the fundamental transmission infrastructure for the country. So there are ways around that. So we're looking at projects that they can be put in at below 1 megawatt. And so our community energy groups actually have got a huge part to play here. We're funding a project looking at onshore wind driven by community wind projects. We've obviously got some very strong community energy networks across the region who are working with communities on both solar and wind, and how we can, in the short term, keep that project portfolio running.
Thanks. I mean, can we urge, perhaps as feedback, the need for political leadership in this area? Because if that is the case, I mean, the finances are that these days, the solar farms that come forward, the 40, 50 megawatt solar farms that will provide enough energy for 15,000 households, that's what we need to be seeing being delivered at speed in our region, as well as wind and tidal, if we want to decarbonise our electricity grid. And obviously, I would have thought as a region, we would hope that we would be in a position that we can produce enough electricity locally to meet demand. I mean, that would be quite ambitious, being a large urban area, but I think that's something we should be aiming for. So I think maybe feedback there should be about the need to step up the political pressure on National Grid to be able to allow us to do this. Because, I mean, although you're right, great small schemes, but small schemes are not going to decarbonise our electricity grid by 2030. We need the big players to be in place and delivering at speed in reality. Thanks.
And
I'm really sorry, Roger.
Could I have one more point? So, so this is at a political level at the moment being discussed, and our mayor will be talking a national kind of roundtable for mayors in terms of this is not an issue just for the Southwest. It has been an issue in the Southwest for 20, 25 years, as I understand it. But this is something that is at that level, and perhaps comment would be really helpful in supporting the kind of serious nature of that. And the other point would be way of unblocking that in the short term is that we have lots of planning permissions in place for energy infrastructure, and that is part of a backlog. And so we're exploring that at the moment to see what can be done to use the capacity there that's sitting in planning to create more short-term kind of access to the market.
Thanks. I think I'm going to do an extra declaration. On occasion, as a gun for hire, work as a consultant for solar farms. I should declare it not in this region, thankfully, but just to sort of put that on the record. Thanks.
I was just going to say, Roger, when you talk about the discussions around the mayoral roundtable that they're doing, that is something that that Ofgem are leading. Do you want to say just a little bit more about some of the bits that Ofgem are doing? So Ofgem are trying to raise the political leadership and ability for political leaders to influence what goes on in this area as well, really.
Yeah, so the conversations with Ofgem have been going on for 4 or 5 months in terms of kind of like the importance from their perspective of leadership at a city region scale. And so that conversation is scheduled for, I think, about 6 weeks' time. But a huge opportunity, I think, in terms of that pressure point you made around turning that back to and highlighting the challenge across the country.
Okay, so just one more follow-up question then. I believe quite often the large companies buy sort of credits to join into the national grid. Do we have many in place in this region where the scheme's not yet delivered, but they might have bought in credits with the national grid to deliver such schemes, whether solar, wind, tidal, or a similar generator?
I don't have an answer on that. I'll have to come back to you on that point, if that's okay.
Anybody else? Oh, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, I've got a question on the funding actually for the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan. I understand it. 60 million is available for projects relating to the action plan. 36 million of this is from West of England Combined Authority funds, and 24 million from match funding. Over what period is that 60 million likely to be spent? And what's the sort of main sources of the match funding?
Okay, thank you. So the target spend is by 2025 in our investment fund period. The main sources of the match funding, it varies hugely across the projects. As you imagine, we're working with small communities. There are pollinator fund and match funding and volunteer time through to larger kind of projects looking at either government funding, private funding. So it does vary hugely depending on the topic area. Is there a particular area you're interested in?
Not particularly, but I just wondered if there was perhaps not particularly, but I just wondered if perhaps there was a particularly large or significant contributor in terms of match funding, or if it's spread over a wide, wide range of contributors.
The principle we take is about 40 to 50% match fund for grant award. And so it comes from across all of those projects and all of the scales we operate at.
Thanks.
No other questions on this? Yeah, Katie.
One more, sorry.
Go on. No.
I'm interested to understand what the authority's doing on, obviously, it's an incredibly small percentage of emissions that are in fact directly controlled by the authority. What work is being done with private sector and with businesses in the region to really put the old thumb screws on? I mean, I know there's quite a bit of carrot. Is there any more stick? And if one wanted to know a bit more in detail about that, just where can that be found?
So just because the question is on work we're doing with private.
Well, yes, with I mean polluters, with emitters, with all the entities that occupy the rest of that percentage. You know, whom you have to work with and set an example for and persuade rather than can control. I'd just be interested to know what the sort of interactions are.
I guess that you said lots of carrots, not many sticks, and we may be to some extent engaging with the converted rather than the people that we really need to start thinking about this, who may be big polluters.
Yes, the chunk that are not.
So there are lots of aspects to that question. I think one piece is really understanding the local area energy planning and the detail of activity in the region. So we a number of goes at that at a UA level and a combined authority level, and we are working with Bristol on a Mission Net Zero project, which will bring funding in next year to do a more detailed piece on that. In terms of the engagement work, again, it's quite project and area specific, but I think a key principle of a piece of work that's described in the paper is about our regional engagement work we're doing over the next year, and that is really about drilling down into both business and resident contributions, both their understanding of their impacts and also then what they can do about that. And one element will be about the business engagement work. We're doing a lot of work with Action Net Zero, and we're also doing a lot of work with Bristol Green Capital Partnership about their role at a regional level, engaging the businesses. And to a point, it does pick up on the chair's comment around are we preaching to the converted? But actually, I think those big emitters, the big corporate players, are very active in this space now. I think there's been a huge transformation of investment in sustainability over the last kind of 5 years. We're seeing that at all levels, but I think at big corporate activity level, huge amount more investment in tackling that issue. So the doors are open. I think it's more about the capacity and the structure in which we go about engaging them.
And looking at their supply chain as well, isn't it? Because there's something like 70 to 80% of all emissions come from small and medium enterprises, and who may not have the capacity really to take this seriously.
Yes, the supply chain is important both for the net zero targets, but also a climate resilience area. And I think climate resilience gives us a really good door into working with those bigger players, because climate resilience threatens the viability of everyone's economic model as we work today. And so engaging through resilience I think is a very good way in to kind of start influencing other agendas in the climate and nature space.
Any other questions? I've got one, which is there's a long list of activity there, and it's hard to tell. Is there some sort of dashboard that talks about the impact we're going to have? Because I find it quite hard to tell where, some of them are very small, put some pollinators into a small green space with volunteers. How as a committee could we maybe have a look at this as an overview and see where the really big impact programs that are going to make a big difference and how they're faring, rather than a very, very long list of great activity?
There are two aspects there. One, the list of 105 actions I know is fairly daunting in terms of getting your head into, and I would suggest one action we'll take for the next update will be about identifying the kind of scale of potential or delivery of those projects, and from a carbon and from a nature perspective. So we'll do some sort of traffic lighting system, so you can focus on the projects from our perspective, which are going to deliver the most towards our objectives. That work is underway, but we'll have that in place for the next update. And the other aspect is about how we communicate both, with the scrutiny of the organisation's work and the region's work, but also how we engage public and business. And the proposal there is we'll have a dashboard for performance, and we'll have that at various levels, one at a very kind of accessible level at the top end, and that will drop down into layers of information around performance. So hopefully that will be a way in which we can help support that.
And that's across the piece, not just with the WECA or just the WECA.
This will be focused on the climate and ecological strategy and action plan. And the principle there is about that is currently kind of focused on combined authority activity funded and delivered through the unitary authorities as well as combined authority. The ambition there is to be more of a front door to all of our work in the region, which is a big undertaking. So I think initially it'll be what's in our strategy and action plan, and then we'll broaden it out from there.
Thank you. I'm going to assume there's no further questions. I'm going to try and summarise some of that, which is you've got a large action plan with looking to get efficient delegations, and I think this committee would be particularly keen to see the integration of climate into all decisions and working jointly with the unitaries, because this is a thing that we're all looking at, and get some very, very clear metrics which we can communicate clearly. There's been a lot of problems about the national grid and making sure that this is very much in the eyes of all political leaders and keeping that strongly. We would like just to be able to identify across the piece where the potential is for really having impact at scale and focusing on those. And it's good to see that there's a lot of carrots and a lot of business engagement, and that climate resilience is being used as a way in, but making sure particularly that both the corporate sector and the SME sector are engaged as far as possible. It's a key thing that we would like to see. Okay, I can see some nods. Shall we move on? Adult education. Thank you, Roger. Adult education and skills. Stephen Bashford. Stephen, welcome. Again, just a few moments to summarise the paper and the key features of it, and then open for questions.
That was right, wasn't it? I should know that really. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to introduce the adult skills paper for you. So effectively, the paper seeks delegations from committee to enable delivery of the next phase of our adult education budget, skills boot camps, and the Multiply programme, all aligned to our regional employment and skills plan, which was agreed by committee earlier this year. That amounts to circa £44 million of investment in skills over the next 2 years to help equip people with the skills they need to get into work or progress within work. Just a couple of highlights to pick out. The paper also includes a review of progress to date on these programmes. 25,900 supported via adult education, so increasingly focusing on areas of greatest need, particularly level 1 and level 2 foundational skills. 1,500 people supported through the Multiply scheme with mathematics, basic numeracy skills, and 2,000 residents supported via our boot camps, and that's short, sharp training from HGV bus drivers to construction, retrofit, health and social care. So a whole range of areas where there's a particular employer demand for those skills. So yeah, very happy to take any questions about the paper, the delegations. Over to you. Thank you.
Any questions? Brenda.
Thank you. On page 110 of the report, there's a comment saying we're unable to forecast our funding allocation for 24-25 under the new Adult Skills Fund, as DfE have not yet confirmed regional allocations. Have we had any update on that?
Good question. So we haven't had concrete confirmation. The government's still working through that policy. We've had nothing to suggest that it won't happen. The government remains committed to adult education, but we haven't had that in writing yet. That's the nature of adult education, is that we're working on a budget which gets confirmed on an annual basis, which does make it harder for us to plan over the long term. So we do as best as we can. It would be fantastic to have
longer term funding settlements in the future, and perhaps something we should really push with government going forward.
Thank you. I noted that the report was signed off on the 24th of August, so I was hoping that there might be some change, but obviously.
We'll continue to push.
Right. Yeah, thank you. It's a pretty fundamental question, isn't it?
So just say it was signed off on that date, but they were also reviewed just at the end of last week. So had there have been a change to it, we would have updated it then. So that was just when they haven't changed since the original comments were produced.
I was just hoping that things might have changed, but obviously not.
Tim.
I always welcome devolution from central government to local government, which is good to see. I was just wondering though, when we envisaged devolution, did we envisage then delegating out the whole decision away from the political administration? I note that the level of delegations seems to permanently delegate this fund. 25, the delegated authority to director level will remain in place for as long as the funds are administered by the mayoral combined authority. I am concerned about the level of delegations that seem to be happening in the combined authority. And that, to me, seems to be pulling away from political oversight and public scrutiny. I noticed that there's quite, some of the elements of the delegations you would expect, but some seem quite substantial. I'm just wondering if there is a change in direction, at what point is that triggered to come back to the combined authority away from delegation? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll comment on that. Colleagues might want to come in too, but with all of these programmes, they're delivered against the employment and skills plan, which was agreed by committee, and that's an evidence-based report which sets out the structure of our labour market and where we need to intervene. So that all the funding programmes need to deliver against that plan. So I suppose if there are changes in circumstances, that would be reflected in the plan, which would need to go back to committee. The reason we're seeking delegations against it enables us to move much faster. So some of the issues we're addressing through these programmes require swift action. So by having that delegation in place, it means that we can do it. Where there are particularly tricky decisions, that will get escalated up to chief executives, and I suppose further if needs be. So there are those checks in place. But ultimately, by having that consensus around the plan, it gives us the framework to be able to deliver much more swiftly and effectively with the delegations.
Thanks, and that's a perfectly reasonable answer. I'm just sort of aware that where you put the money for delivery of the plan can have quite an effect. As an example, with BSIP, when it was agreed at the committee, there was £22 million for supported bus services. 6 months later, without referring back to the committee, that was reduced to £7 million. That was quite a big change under delegation. And I guess it's sort of is where those changes are in the millions of pounds, which can greatly change the direction of travel. I'm just wondering at what point does the political oversight come back?
Okay. Just another comment, just because I appreciate the adult education budget, to give you a sense of how that works, that's largely through our kind of local colleges and training providers. Actually, the annual allocations to those colleges have remained pretty steady, so you don't see kind of significant changes in that profile over time. Each of those providers will have a delivery plan agreed with us, again, to say how it delivers against the objectives of our employment and skills plan. So it's a different fund, but yeah, there are those checks in place as well. So the way it does become, there is a big change, then that will kind of trigger that kind of discussion. But I think the nature of the fund means that we can manage it effectively, albeit completely take your point that when there are significant changes, there needs to be a way of escalating those.
Sorry, I have one other question. Sorry. I should have gone off and read the plan that this relates to, and I apologise, I didn't have time to do that. So you're probably going to now educate me on that it's in the plan. But I'm sort of aware with special educational needs and EHCPs that those have expanded now from the original statements to covering adults up to the age of 25. There's a substantial increase in EHCPs. What provision is, if any, is being made in these plans with regards to children with special educational needs and EHCPs? Thanks.
Yeah, so there's currently an excellent programme which is run in partnership between the local authorities called We Work for Everyone, which focuses particularly on children with special needs. We're looking to
extend that through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So that support will continue. We recognise that in the Employment Skills Plan as a particular area, and there is funding available to support that, and we'll continue to push that.
Thank you very much.
I was just going to follow up on that. I've got a statistic here that currently 6% of the adult population in Bristol with learning difficulties are in paid employment. So that looks like pretty. Oh, okay. So that's still significantly less than what we might like to see. Do you think that if we got a bit of a steady state programme, that we're really going to be challenging that?
We're trying, yeah. I mean, it's clearly a significant statistic. I'd say that things that we've invested in are having a positive impact. You can see the numbers coming through. Some of these figures take some time to shift, so you need to continue investing for a number of years to have a real impact. But yeah, recognising it's a challenge for people both in work and outside of work as well.
Thanks. Richard, you wanted to?
Yeah, sorry. Just to come in, and I know there's a huge amount of information, and people have got a lot to absorb in their own authorities, never mind their own working jobs as well, really. But just the point on that was brought in tangential to this was around that delegations point around the bus levy. So I'll stick with your numbers; they're about right. But it isn't that 22 million was delegated for supported services and it was reduced to 7. The majority of the 22, if I stick with that number, over half of it is spent on concessionary fares. The supported element is 7. It isn't delegated to officers. They haven't reduced anything from 22 to 7 for supported. The 7 is the element of the levy that is designated for supported services. And the decision on that, and I'm sure we'll get into that in more detail, did come back to the November committee to say, here's where that money, are you content where we spend that money? Just on a...
Sorry, I think you may have misunderstood. I was talking about the BSIP fund.
Sorry, well, the BSIP fund's 105, is 105 million. Sorry, the 22 I thought was because is broadly about what the levy number is, really.
We've got BSIP on the agenda. I think we can have a heated debate in a few minutes about BSIP. Should we move on to, I think that's it now, everyone? Yes. I think I think the summary really is that I think the delegations we're going to talk about more generally, but very concerned about the not confirmed regional allocations, making sure that we have got good political oversight, and the send issue, I think, is something that we hope that we'll see the results bearing fruit in time. Thank you. So next up is Malcolm and Steve Hathaway to talk about transport.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start, if that's okay. We've got transport paper in today, which will go to committee next week. There are a suite of recommendations in that paper. It looks at 4 key areas within the combined authorities portfolio. I'm joined by Bill. I don't think Stephen can make it today, actually, Chair. So Bill Davis, who is Principal Transport Strategy Officer. The paper looks at 4 key areas for us. One is the CRSTS rebaselining, which I'll go through in further detail shortly. Future for West, which is why Bill's joined me. Active travel provision and Metro West. I'll go in reverse order. Metro West is seeking a delegation of the final business case to move forward Metro West 2. In particular, we want to press on with delivery of North Filton and Henbury stations, which are the final 2 stations in the Metro West programme, aside from those going out to Pill and Portishead, which is Metro West 1, of course. Then moving back up, we've got active travel funding coming through from Active Travel England. We want to move ahead and deliver some of those active travel schemes, which are important for our regional connectivity and decarbonisation of our regional transport schemes. Future for West, which is looking at options to move forward from the strategic outline case into the outline business case, and then CRSTS. Previously, we had been to see committee members about a year ago, where we articulated that we were £85 million shortfall due to unexpected inflationary pressures, and we would work with the Department of Transport to either seek further funding, which will be no surprise to members that they did not come forward to further funding, or to work with them to agree a revised programme, and they have agreed to a revised opportunity of a revised programme, and the paper looks at how that revised programme has been arrived at. I guess we'll open for questions, Chair.
So questions? Tim?
It's always me. I don't know why. Anyone think I was a troublemaker?
I would like to see you as someone who's probing and doing their job at Scrutiny, Tim.
Okay, I had some notes on this one, so I'm just going to pull them up because that will help me. Okay, because this is quite a complex paperwork. I had a couple of areas, so I thought perhaps if I tackle one and then I give way and I can always come back again. Is that better, Chair? I wanted to, under the CRTS, whatever it's called, there's the, what was it again? CRSTS. Thank you, CRSTS. For someone with dyslexia, that's a real struggle. The Bath corridor, so the A4 corridor programme, which is quite a substantial element of the programme, has quite a large reduction in expenditure. And I understand that's linked to the fact that you can't proceed the Callington Link Road as part of this programme within time. So I had a couple of questions around that. How can you progress the Bath Road corridor without progressing the Callington Link Road, as you're going to substantially reduce down space for traffic on the A4, and you need to put that somewhere else? So I guess that's my first question, really.
Thank you, Councillor. The A4 corridor is considered for the entire stretch of that corridor between Bath and Bristol, of course, and our objectives under the CRSTS to reduce the journey time on the buses by just 10%, actually. Our analysis of that corridor, we can reduce the journey time of that corridor greater than 10% of the bus journey time as it is today by the interventions up to and including Hicksgate Roundabout, so from Bath to Hicksgate Roundabout. The areas from Hicksgate through to Brislington is much more challenging, as I'm sure members of the residents and members of the area will know. The solutions that have been developed for that area include two options along the old Callington road link, which is actually the old railway line. Those solutions are undeliverable within the current time frame of March 27 for various reasons, including the consenting process to be able to achieve that outcome. We have last week actually closed the consultation on that corridor, the element of that corridor as well. And I personally went out to saw some of the residents in that consultation process. We had interesting some feedback. Our initial deliverables for CRSTS within this current time frame up to March 27 will be a suite of interventions through Brislington, predominantly on active travel cycling schemes and some work on the existing bus lanes to give a little bit more opportunity within the bus priority. We are also consulting on an opportunity for a future deliverable, which includes the Canton Road Link. We would seek to find funding for that through a future settlement of CRSTS or another grant from the Department for Transport, subject to the feedback we receive from the public and further development of that scheme.
Okay, so what you're proposing to deliver then is not reliant on delivering a link road on the Brislington tramway.
That's correct in this current stage, yes.
Okay, that's useful to know. I did note that report 13.1 and 13.2 under land issues said that there were no property implications apart from around the M32 and transport hub. Actually, there are property implications, of course, on the Callington link road, because we don't own, it's not all under public ownership. I was just surprised that was missing. I noticed it was actually right at the back of the report, but I would have expected it to be in that chapter, because it's one of the reasons, I presume, well, it's actually stated at the end of the report being one of the main reasons that you're dropping that from the programme because of the lack of land ownership. And obviously that causes delay because you need a public inquiry and the right then to compulsory purchase. I was just surprised that was missing from that part of the report.
Would that be because it's not actually part of the programme?
Well, we aim to capture, thank you, Chair, we aim to capture some of those challenges within paragraph 4.9 of the report, which specifically looks at the reasons why we're unable to deliver Brislington within this current time frame. That includes whether we'll need to go for a future, for example, development consent order through a consenting strategy. And as a consequence of that being moved to a latest time within the CRSTS settlement, i.e. beyond 27, we felt actually exploring reasons of why there was challenges in terms of land and consenting in this current programme, aside from the M32, as you recognise, was sufficiently captured in the paper.
Thanks. One last question on this particular area, and then I'll be quiet for a little while. The Future West, obviously that has a Bristol to Bath corridor. I wasn't able to read the more extensive paper because one, I ran out of time, and two, the link in the paperwork doesn't work. So you have to physically type it out on a second device. That's not the first time I've seen that in your, it's if you put in a whole big link and it goes over the page, the link then doesn't work. My question is, Future West, if the route, is the Future West route along the same route that you're doing these improvements? And is there sort of a clash, as in you could be doing these improvements along the Bath Road, and then you bring along a Future West scheme, and you basically need to rip out or replace some of the improvements you've done? Would that be correct, or am I completely incorrect in asking that question?
I will pick up a few points. Thank you for your feedback on the link. We'll aim to fix those in future publications. It's frustrating. The A4 corridor is indeed the same corridor for the Future for West scheme, and you'll recognise from the paper the Future for West scheme is somewhat further down the line. It's important for us to deliver transport corridor improvements now. It's important for us to deliver those schemes listed in the paper by 27, not least of which we want to secure future funding, of course, for CRSTS and other schemes. We haven't made the decision on whether Future for West is a rubber wheel solution or steel wheel solution. If it's a rubber wheel solution, then there's a high chance that the work we're doing currently will complement the Future for West mass transit schemes. Equally, if it's a steel wheel solution, I think all bets are off, and who knows how that will pan out. But the finishing off the strategic outline case of Future for West and building on the outline business case of Future for West will tell us those answers to those questions.
Thank you. I'll be quiet for a moment.
While we're on the A4 in particular, I was just interested to know, it looks to me like the long-term plans would be to divert traffic from its current alignment. We've got a major master planning exercise happening in Temple Quarter, and it looks to me like there may be an impact on Temple Quarter in terms of the way that the traffic is then managed. And I'm wondering what interface is happening between this master plan and that master plan.
Yeah, fair observation, Chair. We, of course, are intrinsic within the Temple Quarter master planning exercise, which is being led by one of our own delivery directors from the Combined Authority in partnership with the other partners in that scheme. We have the overall Wordtum traffic modelling system, so we can traffic model between the two schemes, and we are now revising our traffic model on the A4 corridor scheme following the feedback, which will be one of our objectives before we get to the end of this current stage. We can bring that into the work that our colleagues are doing in the Temple Quarter and ensure that's not an issue.
Any other questions? Jonathan.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I'm looking at the proposed CRSTS budget allocations, and I see that 11.58 million has been allocated or is proposed to be allocated for Bristol low traffic neighbourhoods. Is that funding actually in place? Only I understood that the central government was going to pour the funding for low traffic neighbourhoods.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, if you believe the media, then the answer probably is yes. But the reality is that the allocation has been made within CRSTS for low traffic neighbourhoods. We have some in Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire and Bristol. Bristol being the largest allocation. The Department for Transport has said they will review future allocations and they are reviewing low traffic neighbourhoods. We're taking that as therefore we can crack on what we're doing. I know Bristol are out for consultation on their low traffic neighbourhoods at this time, and we continue to support that. I think it's an intrinsic part of decarbonisation of our transport network.
So is that review future allocations within this scheme to low traffic neighbourhoods, or this is already a contract with DFT and they can't change the existing contract?
Yeah, effectively, Chair. Yeah, subject to us, of course, presenting this back as a rebaseline proposal for the committee on Friday. So hopefully we won't change the positions between now and Friday. We'll see what the department do. But our understanding is we've met with the department on this particular subject a few times. Our understanding is this is an allocation for low traffic neighbourhoods within our CRSTS settlement. We will continue with those delivery of those low traffic neighbourhoods within our CRSTS settlement. Future funding for low traffic neighbourhoods are subject to review, not current funding.
Well,
The Keynsham bypass, the consultation for that has just closed. I've never seen such strong opinions. And I think what people have said to me very clearly is it didn't seem they'd done much data collection or modelling. In other words, you'd actually come up with the ideas and put them in. And I guess you're working under such a tight schedule because you want to get it out next year and get going. But I think it has caused a degree of skepticism, shall we say, that some of the things you proposed were quite naive. So, I mean, is that what we're going to see in future, that you'll get your traffic people in, they'll say what they want to do, and then they'll do a second one where they'll actually put some data in?
I think there's a few points there, Councillor. Thank you. Yeah, the observations we have some quite strong views of the use of the Keynsham bypass. There's been some misunderstanding within the public about the use of the Keynsham bypass and whether it's going to be going forwards in its proposals. There are further traffic modelling to be done. We've said to the public, and this is factual, of course, and how we have to develop our projects, that once we've taken their feedback, we'll iterate the design and we'll come back and have a conversation with them again. So we will be doing that. When we are still looking for, effectively providing a priority bus lane to get people back onto public transport and get those bus services travelling between A and B quicker. There are no simple solutions within our current transport network, I must add, and there will be some winners and some losers in this scheme. The Keynsham bypass, which is a dual carriageway today, has been proposed to be brought down to one carriageway for general traffic and one bus lane, express bus lane, complete with an additional stop within the centre of Keynsham, which is near to the main park. We will take all those feedback on board and we'll do some further testing and traffic model testing on top of that to see if the benefits versus the disbenefits outweigh. So there's some more work to be done in that space, but nonetheless, I think we still need to remind ourselves that we want better transport systems within our region, and there is a finite amount of space to be able to deliver those transport schemes, and we need to make some difficult decisions to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think my point is that so they're starting to fight back with data. So they've been out and counted the vehicles and got 1,600 vehicles in an hour and 4 buses. So, you know, they're actually going for you with data against that. But it was more a strategic thing. I think if you'd done a little bit more data analysis to start with, you would have been able to present it better.
Thank you for your feedback. I'll take that on board. I am head of capital delivery, so if I'm not taking feedback on from councillors and residents, then I'm not doing my job, so I will take that on board. We are up against it in terms of timeframes. You can imagine an infrastructure project of that scale. We've got about 3.5 years left to deliver it, so we do need to press on. That is not to ignore the views of residents or the evidence that underpins the scheme, which we must do.
Yeah.
I'm going to mildly abuse my privileges here. I'm really pleased to see schemes which are trying to let the air out of the balloon rather than thinking that the balloon is always going to be the same size and all we ever do is squeeze it and displace traffic elsewhere. What we should be doing is trying to let the air out of the balloon altogether. And if we can try and get to a place where we're no longer predicting, providing, we're deciding and designing, then I think that's something that we should be all celebrating and trying our best to reassure residents that actually the majority of people do want to use other forms of transport, but they feel car dependent. So I think that's a message we've got to try and get through a little bit better, possibly. While I'm abusing my privileges, I'm going to go on to one of the biggest concerns I have in all of this, particularly with the Future West, is carbon. And what I haven't seen is a carbon budget so we've got a lot of tunnelling options, whether they be cut and cover or proper tunnelling. It would seem to me they're not only hugely expensive, but they're probably talk about an awful lot of embedded carbon. And at the moment, our sort of carbon analysis basically says, oh, well, it's public transport, it must be fine. But I don't think, now I think we've heard already that we're having some trouble getting the metrics and embedding carbon in every decision we make. But on something of this scale, where we're talking about this sort of amount of financial investment, I'm really worried we're investing an awful lot of embedded carbon in, and that's not being factored into our decisions.
So I'll pick up, because it's true of the CRSTS programme as well, of course, Chair. So I'll pick up on that point and I'll pass over to Bill for Future for West. We are building a carbon assessment tool, because I'm equally concerned that we could be investing in significant infrastructure to the detriment of the overall carbon economy of our country. So that's not much use, of course, but we need to balance those two off. So we will be doing that as part of the CRSTS, and it'll be part of our decision making within the outline and full business cases, what the carbon, embedded carbon is within the construction versus what carbon will be saved through the transport solution that's delivered. But I will pass over to Bill for Future for West, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Thanks, Malcolm. So the concept for Future for West, or as it was known as mass transit, was first presented in the Joint Transport Study that was presented to Joint Committee in October 2017, and it set out 4 strategic corridors with a fundamental uplift in the quality of public transport in those corridors, to reduce car dependency, as part of the decarbonisation agenda, and also the opportunities for wider benefits, such as for around public realm. Those 4 corridors were incorporated into the Joint Local Transport Plan as adopted in March 2020. The process since then has been generating and then taking a long list of over 70 options within those 4 strategic corridors and compressing them down to a manageable shortlist. The recommendations in the report are that the committee on Friday endorses the strategic outline case, the SOC, and then advises on how to progress with the next stage of the work. So there are 3 options that are presented for the committee to consider. Option A is the officer opinion, which is to take the shortlisted options, which are set out in table 4A of the report, around 10 of them, to take those through from strategic outline case and to whittle them down to preferred option for the outline business case. Officers feel this is the most rigorous approach. It is the one that is most likely to be resilient to a future challenge. And there will be future challenges, undoubtedly, if we end up with, for example, an at-grade option that will require bold decisions around road space reallocation, and we need to demonstrate that the appropriate shortlisting process had happened. Option B is to take the work done to date and then to make a decision about, or offer the opportunity to discard some of the most expensive options, those that involve significant extents of tunnelling and thus come in at cost range over £15 billion. Option C is provide the flexibility to the leaders and mayors to select different options within different corridors. So you could have, for example, an underground option to the airport, but at-grade options for other corridors. I think members will be aware of the challenges to the delivery of this type of infrastructure in the UK. We cast our eyes enviously over the Channel. We see that any town or city in France with a population of over 200,000 has probably got a mass transit network in some shape or form. In the UK, the process for delivery of such infrastructure is much more centralised. The challenges towards accessing the necessary funding and getting the necessary consents. West Yorkshire has been notable in the media recently for some of the progress that they have made, and it's difficult to underestimate or overestimate, so I need to get that the right way round, how important the Future for Us project is in terms of our joint local transport plan, in terms of delivering the objectives of the plan and unlocking wider benefits around public realm, decarbonisation and so on. Since the adoption of the joint local transport plan, much further thought is being given to what you would call capital carbon, the emissions directly related to pouring concrete, tunnelling and all the rest of it. I think in terms of the process we're on at the moment, where we've shortlisted down from just over 70 route options down to up to a dozen, I think the next stage in the outline business case will then need to take the capital carbon element into account in coming up with an overall forecast of the performance of the project in terms of its carbon credentials. And this approach needs to be, as Malcolm says, is taken across the capital programme as a whole. But clearly this one will have to have a key, it'll have to be a key priority for it as well. So I'm not really, I can't give an answer to what is the capital carbon element of this scheme thus far, but by outline business case stage, we should be in a much better position, much better informed position on that one, Chair.
Tim.
Metro West, thank you very much for that introduction. From what I can see, a tunnelling option, an underground option, which would provide 4 routes, which would service part of the city, certainly wouldn't service anyone living in my area of the city, would cost £18 billion, which is well beyond billion. No, billion. Yeah, no, definitely billion. £18 billion, which is well beyond any level of funding we've ever received from central government. And we sort of already see that they're considering ditching HS2. The idea as a city that we will receive that money is just fantasy. We also can't borrow the money because, of course, to do that would be on a concept of achieving growth. So when we look at other cities that have mass transport systems, most of them have had them for a very long time. They haven't built them recently. That's because obviously, you know, delivering an extra 100,000 households, delivering X amount of business space is the business case justification for it. I know I couldn't see it again, but somewhere I think in the report I read somewhere that there was a business case of 0.1 BCR. So the actual benefit, the cost benefit analysis had come back that it would deliver a 0.1. Last time we looked at heavy rail back in the late 90s, we'll all remember the dispute, the slight dispute that happened, the Bristol City Centre to South Gloucestershire route. That didn't actually collapse because of the dispute. It collapsed because the BCR rating fell below 1, which was a hard line for the government. It had to have. In other words, if you invest £100 million, they expect at least £100 million of economic benefit to your region. And there's a table for measuring that. The way the Department of Transport does it in the past is that they are certainly skewed towards road building and skewed against trams and buses and public transport, which I have a dispute with them. But there's no way you'll ever get to an argument with the Department of Transport to fund an £18 billion scheme. I just think we need to be realistic as a billion. Yeah. No, I said billion again. You guys just don't get a Cornish accent. It's always a billion. So there's no way we would get £18 billion from them. That was billion again, by the way, not million. From the Department of Transport. I think what we need to do is we need to be ambitious but realistic. There's no point setting an ambition which actually will stop other public transport improvements from occurring. Because if this is our big thing and that's what we're trying to fund, we won't be funding other measures that we could be doing in the short to medium term, because everything will be put in this one pot to try to deliver this one scheme, which actually has very little benefit for the rest of the region as well, such as Bath. One line linking Bristol to Bath doesn't solve Bath's major transport issues either. So, I mean, my personal view is I understand that the officers have sort of said at the moment everything should be left on the table. But I don't think any more money should be wasted on looking at the full tunnelling routes. That's my view. I just do not see any point, unless there's a major shift in the way the country works, there's no point wasting money on that. What we should be looking at is a more ambitious, probably rubber-wheeled, although it could be a mixture of rubber-wheeled and steel-wheeled schemes. I'd be interested also to see what we've done to examine light rail rather than just heavy rail. There can be big differences in cost. My one other point, as I'm on a rant and you haven't stopped me yet,
we are going to have to do a little bit of agenda management in a minute, Tim.
I wanted to promote BBCE. I know BBCC is being promoted. My guess is that BBCE is actually the Brislington tramway route. And I think that would be a far superior route. It would de-risk the programme. It's a lot higher risk trying to dig up the A4 than actually going down an old railway route and turning that into a mass transit route with a cycleway. Thank you very much.
Was that a question?
Well, it's more of a rant, but I think probably where I'm personally pointing at is that we as a committee should actually be looking to recommend option B rather than option A, as it should be more specific and more well, we shouldn't go wasting money, I think, on the underground options. I also want to point out that I think including the Callington Greenway, the old Brislington tramway as a possible route, along with a cycleway, will be a far superior route than the A4.
Katie, I'd like to know if this committee is going to actually recommend a particular option or make more general commentary. But Katie.
Well, mine is a shorter general comment. Yes, I think it's an important question we can come to about whether we come up with a recommendation on the options. I just wanted to combine a couple of the things that have just been said by you, Chair, and by Councillor Kent. I do imagine that there is an opportunity cost to all the focus on this long-term, unimaginably expensive and carbon expensive plan. And I just want to remind us to juxtapose it with the howl of anguish we heard earlier from the public around a very different, very immediate set of things they want, and that we must make sure that is reflected in your feedback, Chair, on Friday. I mean, we're talking about some humble bus routes, and I just, that must be very much in the forefront of our minds, I think, while we look at these longer term things. And just on the risk of being a bit of a one-trick pony here, on the carbon, just to come back to the Future for West answer about the coming piece, is that the carbon management plans and carbon accounting referred to on page 122? Probably it is. I guess I'm interested to know whether, if the carbon bill next to the money bill is big enough, I mean, would that, there's no sort of, it's not easy to see whether that would ever tip it into no, if you know what I mean, just how we'd end up weighing it.
I think there's probably, in a roundabout way of answering that, there's 2 points. Just one, I just wanted to come back to Councillor Kent's point about the option B. The work programme, the impact on it from option A will be relatively minor in terms of taking the shortlist and moving to the next stage. We wouldn't, it's not the intention of the work programme to add onerous amounts of additional study before ruling out an underground option. It's more that the focus is around ensuring that the decision to go for the right option is robust enough to stand up to a future challenge where, for example, businesses could object to road space reallocation, removing parking, cutting through routes of general traffic, those sort of issues. And so it's more of a procedural decision in that way to ensure that we have a watertight appraisal that when they get to a public inquiry on applying for the Transport Works Act order, etc., that we can push back and say no, underground was not, if in that situation, was not deliverable, and so we can demonstrate that it hadn't been. In terms of the carbon impact overall, it's probably worth highlighting some of the elements around section 17 in scheme costs, as well as referring back to the Joint Local Transport Plan again. If we have an overall strategy of which this is a pivotal part, and it's working with other interventions, which then unlock road space reallocation, provide opportunities to reduce car dependency, and the likelihood of demand management options being required to help fund the local contribution towards this, then the carbon impact of the proposal, it becomes the catalyst for unlocking a much wider reduction in carbon, because other people are travelling more sustainably because of the opportunities that this has unlocked. It would be much more straightforward to have the policy justification to make more radical decisions about road space reallocation if you know that schemes such as this are delivering those types of very challenging decisions along the key corridors. But there's a transformational opportunity.
Isn't the whole point of tunnelling is that you're avoiding those difficult decisions about changing the demand, and you're actually not doing that. You're accepting that we're going to have people using their cars for a very long time. We're going to try and tunnel under them, rather than the sort of suite of measures that provides alternatives and gets people out of the cars at the same time. You don't have to answer that, Bill. That's kind of a rhetorical question, which may be something that we are trying to find a very polite way of reflecting in our feedback to the overall committee. We are now, we've got 40 minutes left in this meeting. We've got several more items on the agenda. Is there anything else that people want to talk about this particular thing? I'm going to be highlighting concerns about deliverability of CRSTS, even with the rescope programme. I think keeping the M32 in the programme is maybe of some. I'm not clear about whether or not the M32 works will actually happen during this programme, or if it's a pipeline approach. So that's maybe something I should ask now very quickly, so I'm clear.
So I'll give you an answer, Chair. Yeah, the current ambition is to remain the M32 within this current programme. That is coming to us with challenges, though, to be frank with you. Coming to us with challenges, that schedule. Principally because National Highways, of course, have got the interface and they want to do works at Eastville Viaduct. That is not slowing down my project team. I'm absolutely clear with them that we need to press on and deliver the M32 sustainable transport corridor, because we've got too much uncertainty with National Highways. Nonetheless, of course, it is a difficult scheme which has that interface to National Highways and need to build a junction onto the M32. That can't be done without National Highways being on board. And if they want to play a hardball, then it could get a bit difficult, to be frank with you. Nonetheless, I aspire to get that over the line. My chief executive would give me no easement to avoid it getting over the line within the CRSTS period.
And there's something in there about moving from 10 to 25% of more design. Is that basically de-risking the programme, so we've got more options, and that there might be sort of things that can be done more quickly and more agilely than maybe the major kind of some of the major things like the M32? I wasn't quite sure what that was actually saying, but the government seems to have released a bit of freedom.
Yes, the government have. So about 2 weeks ago, Department for Transport moved the goalposts, which was too late for the committee, but we've been asked by the government to move from a 10% over programming list to a 25% over programming list. That basically means you have a list of projects which, if you wanted to swap out the ones that are in the committed programme with something else because it's undeliverable, you could take something off that list. That was a £50 million list of projects that can move up to £135 million list of projects now. We're working with our unitary authority partners to define what that list looks like, and when DFT actually give us a timescale for submission of that list, we'll probably need to come back to committee with what that looks like.
And I guess part of that would be maybe setting up the RSTS too. So you've got a pipeline of projects which de-risk the current programme and sets up the future programme. Okay.
Yes,
all right.
That's absolutely. Thank you.
Do we want to talk any more about transport? We've got quite a lot more to do, including the paperwork for the joint committee. So shall we move on now to what might also take a little bit of time, which is BSIP prioritisation? We've got, is it Malcolm or Bob coming? Bob and Phil. So welcome to Bob and Phil. I'm going to propose we try and limit this to about 10 or 15 minutes so that we've got some chance of getting through the rest of the. So can we keep our maybe a little less ranting, a little bit more questions, and then maybe summarising at the end? And I'm using your words, Tim, rather than trying to any. Sorry? You have a rant. Okay, well, let's Bob, Phil, welcome. And if you do a very quick summary, and then we'll get into questions and debate and try and get you through.
A quick summary. This is the BSIP programme is a 3-year programme delivering £57.5 million of revenue improvements. We're being measured against 5 key targets to do that, which is reducing bus journey times on corridors, working with our CRSTS colleagues to ensure that we deliver that, improving punctuality on bus services, returning the patronage. This is the most important one to me, returning patronage levels to pre-pandemic.
Phil, I think we're going to, because of the time, I'm sorry, we're going to assume that people have read the paper and understand the main aims of it. And if you could just talk particularly about the recent information, I guess, which is mostly about KPMG.
Yeah, so yeah, I would just set the context of that. That was all. And that was the most important thing. So the recent information we've had was the change of guidance in May from the DFT to say that we couldn't Previously, we couldn't deliver supported services unless they showed clear trajectory to commercial viability by the end of the funding period. They said now that we need to show value for money. So we've done a piece of work with KPMG to identify how we show value for money of the initiatives that we're delivering in BSIP. And that has come up with a prioritised list of how we would invest any underspends. We also had some change guidance about 10 days ago from DfT that we could use the BSIP funding to extend bus services and only bus services to 2026. We've done some estimates of what that's likely to look like. We've got further work to do on that. But what that's identified at the moment, we are forecasting a £27,000 overspend for the BSIP budget, assuming that we extend all of the existing bus services. Now, there's some assumptions in that. We need to do further work on that and on the detail of that. So whilst the criteria that we've delivered on how we would invest any further funding is really important at the moment, and there's likely to be underspends as we continue to update our forecasts on a monthly basis, we've got a criteria in place now for how we would invest that money. Very quick whistle-stop tour.
So let's try and manage the time well, Tim.
I'll try and be quick. On the BSIP extension, I think that's welcome news given the time frame you're up against. I just was wondering why under the recommendations that actually wasn't a specific request of the committee. It seems to have been just simply an extension of expending in that area has been made under delegated authority.
Yeah, I mean, as ever, this was late information that we received during the committee paper. We need to do a lot more work before we can come back and bring a recommendation to either our directors under their existing delegations or indeed give that updated information to committee. Hopefully, we'll be able to bring any updated information to committee in January at the next committee.
Thanks. There was in that previous BSIP paperwork a hope to extend ticket reductions to younger people under age 21. Is that factored into the finances here, and when would that start?
Yes, that is factored into the finances.
And so when is that planned to start roughly?
Well, we've got a lot more work to do to understand the costs and the implications of doing that. So that work's taking place at the moment. The team have been very much focused on delivering the Care Leavers offer, which is due to go live at the end of this month, which was part of our Fares Package 2. So they'll be moving on to that work over the next couple of months.
Okay, thanks. And then I did have one other question. In 12, under legal implications, 12.1, it refers to paragraph 4.12. Paragraph 4.12 I couldn't find in the report. I could find 4.1, I could find 4.2, but it appears 4.3, 4.4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 may have been deleted. Or is that a typo by the legal officer? He or she appears to have read a different report to the one we are.
I will pick that up with our legal officer. The report was evolving still, to be fair, Tim. And so I'll pick that up and make sure we get clarity on exactly what that refers to.
Does that mean the legal officer saw a report with substantially more in than we are?
No, the report has not changed substantially.
Because they refer to a Westlink contract change. I couldn't find any other reference to that in the paperwork.
Westlink is referenced in the paperwork, but I'll confirm exactly that it's the correct paragraph number that it refers to.
Any other questions? I've got a question as to the speed and pace and whether or not about Westlink. I'm getting an awful lot of concerns that it's running around with one person at a time, and particularly that it's not really connecting people. I know it's meant to connect in the city to other bus services, but the boundaries could be reviewed, and I'd like to know the sort of pace and scale of that review.
Yeah, we're rapidly reviewing the boundary changes, and actually there's a very good reason for that, and that's last week the traffic commissioner gave some clarity on the differences between European drivers' domestic hours and UK domestic hours, and he's decreed that minibuses can only travel across the region for 20 minutes. Otherwise, we have to change the driver's hours regulations to EU, which would mean an additional 15 to 16 drivers and 5 more vehicles overnight to do the same work. Now, the way around that is to change the zones so that the vehicles don't travel for more than 20 minutes at any given time, and then we can carry on with the current arrangements. So we were going to revise the zones anyway. There is now an urgent need to address the zones, and that will result in more zones and shorter journeys, which is what I think we should be doing anyway. Cheers.
Is it kind of, is that a showstopper? Is this still going to work?
Yes, I think, well, it's what we were going to propose anyway. And basically, the challenge at the moment with the DRT is that there's an awful lot of unproductive running time between journeys. And that's because people can travel for very long distances, and that ties the vehicle up for obviously a huge amount of time. And the way around that is clearly to restrict to a more reasonable journey traveling distance. And we were minded to anyway, because at the moment, somebody can actually literally travel 32 miles for nothing.
Including a number of journalists who seem to have been taking the vans away from the traveling public.
Correct. And you know, it's time we reviewed the Westlink operation, which is what we're doing. So there's a soft touch, three-month review, 1 or 2 minor amendments we've learned since we started introducing Westlink. But now, in light of the Traffic Commissioner's view, we now need to go at some speed to try and change things a little bit more radically than perhaps we were originally intending to do. But it will be for the better, and it will result in a better service overall.
That's quite reassuring, really. Is there any other questions? Tim?
So I have one other which I forgot about. Under best value, the subsidised services that Westlink and other services we're supporting, do any of them at the moment receive a subsidy greater than £40 per passenger journey, which I know is your hard floor limit?
Yeah, it was at the tender process last year for the levy funding, so it's a slightly different figure, but yeah, none of them are, they're way below the £40 per head at the moment.
Thank you.
I'm going to very quickly update. We've had a task and finish group on BSIP. We've got another one in a week from now. The basic outcome of that was that the price of the tenders have gone up so very much, and the extension to 2026 means there's very little prospect of introducing new supported services, and that we will be looking at hopefully a monthly dashboard of performance across the whole of the BSIP so that members can scrutinise. We'll be looking to make sure that that gives us the information we need next week. I think that's probably a really good basic summary, isn't it? So that we've got that political scrutiny at regular moments for what a programme is very innovative and has to make very agile decisions, all the more so now. Are we happy to move on to the next thing on the agenda?
Chair, can I just correct
one
thing which I identified? 4.12, it should be 5.12. Apologies. I will make sure that gets corrected in the papers.
Is that what you were going to say as well?
I think it might actually be 5.13 because it says we'll be now taking the opportunity to significantly change how Westlink operates. The changes that are listed in the bullets will be contractual changes, so the legal advisor is just confirming that that's within scope. And all that's happened there is an extra number went into the recommendations, so everything just shuffled down in the next iteration of the draft. So nothing sinister and no hidden drafts, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
I think the point being here clearly is that this programme and this report are written at pace, and we're having to, it's very innovative, and we really need to make rapid course corrections within this programme, and we hope to be part of the solution, scrutinising a dashboard. So thanks. Transformation programme update. Thank you. Are you going to talk briefly about this, or? No, sorry. Oh, my apologies. I should be looking at the Rachel. Yes.
I can talk about
that. Yeah.
So this paper provides an update on the transformation programme. It provides update across all four work streams that are progressing across the programme. A couple of points that I would draw committee's attention to. Paragraph 2.4 responds to a point that the Audit Committee and the Chair of Scrutiny have already raised about putting some firmer dates on actions and completion dates, which we will address for the next iteration of this work. So just to note that that will come through. And then the other point to note is paragraph 2.5, which gives a kind of a broad summary of the key areas of progress that have occurred across the programme since June committee. I won't go through them in detail, but happy to take questions on any of those. And similarly, the remainder of the report provides a detailed update on each action across the programme. And again, happy to take questions on those.
I think it's safe to say that Audit Committee looked at this in some detail and made a number of comments, and that it may be, unless there's any burning question, I mean, happy to take questions, but given that Audit has looked at this and hopefully will be feeding back to the overall committee, it may be that we one of the key things that I've actually noticed has changed is that we had an awful lot of ongoing, and we've now, that's been tightened up. So it's either got a date or a specific outcome that's going to be required, which I think has improved the paper. Thank you.
No, yeah, we've done it where we can, and we will do a further review for the next round of papers.
It did look like you ran out of steam because ongoing appears rather a lot in the last section. But was there any other issues about this? I'm going to say one, which is we were told last time we met by the monitoring officer that there was a lot of low-hanging fruit and quick wins around being able to change some of the operations of the Constitution. It's clear that that's not happened, and I think we need to express our concerns that that might reflect a culture where the trust still needs to be built. And that's probably, I don't know if you want to come back on that, Dan, but I think that would be a really nice, simple, short summary.
Yeah, I don't think I can improve on that observation, Chair. Thank you.
Can we move on then again? I'm losing my way in my... so next is statutory senior appointments. I think we just note those, don't we? Next is the budget forecast. Follow the money. Does anyone want to?
Solange is joining us for this, Chair.
Okay. So Solange, welcome. We've got that and the Audit Committee annual report. Should we do the first one first?
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Solange.
So the report sets out the combined authority and Miro budget forecast for 23-24, including revenue and capital. And the report is for noting purposes. So figure 1 shows that we are predicting a surplus, and that is mainly due to interest earnings through treasury management, which are one-off in nature. In terms of reserves, the level of general reserves brought forward was just under 2.5 million. The report includes a table to show the movement in reserves in figure 4 and figure 5, which provides some comparative information based on published data from other combined authorities, which show that our reserves are still very low. Appendix 2 shows the capital forecast for the year with a revised forecast of 126 million and includes full commentary on the variance movements by project. And then lastly, the Miro office forecast is a balanced year-end position as per figure 6 in the report.
Thank you. Very succinct. Any questions? Ben.
So just noting, I like the fact that the reserves have been pointed out, been quite low. What is the ambition or target to get those up to where they should need to be?
So committee previously approved that we should be at 5% of our net revenue spend. So the budget that was approved in January was about 115 million. So it would be around 5.7 million general reserve balance.
Do we have a target for when that will be achieved?
We're working on it. So depends where we land at year end.
I've got a further question. I know that in the report, it does mention that there's ongoing forecasting issues with unitary authorities, and that needs to improve. What type of headway has been made on that? And that's under the capital investment programme area.
So Rachel is our new interim Section 73 officer and is working with the Section 151s in the UAs to just work through making sure that they're received in a timely manner and as accurate as possible.
And also just to add to that, so what we're doing at the moment is producing a lot of information to actually share with the UA 151s so that they can understand what information is coming either late or incomplete, in order that they can then address that with their director colleagues in-house and then provide us with the complete set of data. Because at the moment, a lot of the financial information comes directly from the project side, so from under the directors. So 151s aren't actually involved in that process. So what I'm doing is trying to tighten that up with them by giving them examples of where the information needs to be complete so that we can have a more complete picture moving forward.
Yes, Jonathan, sorry, didn't I?
Sorry, yeah. Just a quick one, actually, in figure 1. The approved budget for supplies and services was 7 million. And the full year forecast is 23. And so I wondered that's a very big increase. What's driving that?
So if you look at paragraph 3.2.5, we've just tried to explain that it relates to business growth support programs and local growth capacity. So some extra funding that's come in, which means that the expenditure is higher.
The Audit Committee annual report.
Okay. I don't have much to say on this one because it's already gone through Audit Committee in July and was approved. But it is the first time we are taking this report to the main committee. So it gives the Audit Committee a chance to demonstrate that it's fulfilled its terms of reference and share its achievements with the main committee. So it's a positive step.
I suggest we move swiftly on to the Joint Committee, where we have Invest in Bristol and Bath review. Oh, I'm sorry, Solange is here, so let's do it the other way around. Let's look at the LEP and the ABB budget forecast, since you're sitting in the chair already.
Yeah, okay. So this report is the LEP budget forecast, again, for capital and revenue funding, and it also includes change requests. Pete also has gone up now, but he contributes to this report. So the forecast revenue grants is 14 million against the original budget of 7 million. And this is mainly due to the net zero hub increases in funding as indicated in figure 1 and figure 2. The forecast reserves position is predicted to be 214,000 at the end of the year, following the main drawdowns of 160k contribution to the LEP forecast. As a result of the reduction of the core capacity grant, which went from 500,000 to 250. So there is a shortfall there. And then the report includes a change request that went to the Programme Review Board previously, and also a Metro West 2 approval from the Economic Development Fund, which is actually featured in the infrastructure transport paper.
Good job. Looks like there's no particular questions on that. So Stephen, Invest in Bristol and Bath. Stephen Bashford back again. Thank you for a second round. Thank you, Solange. Again, we're running short on time, so
quick overview.
Top level, please, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, so the paper sets out an update on the midterm review of Inward Investment Service Invest Bristol and Bath, which currently runs between April 2020 and March 2025, and it asks committee to support the findings, but also agree next steps for the existing programme, making changes to the existing programme, and then also building the future model, which will come back to committee in due course. So just some brief highlights. It was a wide-ranging review. It interviewed a number of local, regional, national stakeholders about the service. Overall, it showed that this service is exceeding its targets in terms of jobs impact, and a positive statistic as well, that over 75% of employees recruited were local as well in terms of those new investments. It does say, though, that we've got scope to be more ambitious with our targets, so that's something we'll be thinking about for the next stage. The stakeholder feedback was positive, particularly external stakeholders, although we did pick up some challenges around local stakeholders and a relationship with the local authorities, which we need to think about, with some recommendations about improved reporting and governance as well, which need to be taken on board. So yeah, the recommendation is to agree those things. Very happy to take any questions. The review itself is attached to the papers, the exec summary.
Thanks. Any questions? I'm getting a distinct feeling that I'm not going to be feeding back to the Joint Committee, and that we haven't really got any particularly strong feedback on that particular. I've got a slot on the agenda, but I haven't really picked up much in the way of feedback. I think the one thing I'd say is it'd be very good to have some more ambitious targets. If we're absolutely smashing the targets, they're clearly too low.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. You know, it's great to smash the targets, but we've got to stretch them again. So that's good.
Thank you.
Hal, it looks like you're poised to say something.
Well, I was reluctant to be drawn into it, but you do wonder they're ahead of their targets. And when I look at the 54 things that they've written down there, a lot of them don't seem absolutely crucial. And I wonder why. That's why actually you're ahead of targets, because you're not drowning in making these differences. But I was pleased to see that I think you are contesting a number of these things. There's a healthy debate going on. So I felt comfortable with that. But it did seem that you'd done a few interviews and there was far too many things to really deal with. We should have prioritised a bit more.
Yeah, there are clearly very number of recommendations, and that was the external reviewer is keen to include those, but we will obviously need to prioritise thinking about the future. On the targets, I think it's just to say though that the macroeconomic environments, we did have the pandemic as well, so we were expecting that to have maybe a more significant impact in terms of investment coming into the region. So positive that still held up pretty well, given that. But yeah, no, absolutely. The key finding is let's be even more ambitious around this in the future.
Shall we move on? Where are we now on our agenda? I've given a very brief. We're now on agenda item 8. So I think I've given a very brief verbal update on the BSIP task and finish group. I don't think there's anything more to add to that, is there? The overview and scrutiny work programme is effectively set out. I think the key thing is we have within, I think, 6 working days organised a task and finish group to sit for BSIP, which I was very pleased about, and thank you to officers for supporting that. The next thing I would like to start looking at is Roger Hoare, who was here earlier, has offered us a number of training sessions, which would probably be twilight to look at the climate in the ecological emergency and take us through basic level understanding and something about how we're tackling that. The key question is, would people like twilight? The idea would be we have basically 3 sessions where we tackle 2 of the 6 themes each. Would people like twilight sessions, and if so, would they prefer them as a online or an in-person? So just put your hands up if you prefer in person or online. I'm taking it as online. Okay. The idea would be to have those 3 sessions, and then if we can do it by the 8th of December, which is our next meeting, is to regroup and decide and have actually use the 8th of December to have a real in-depth look at climate and ecological emergency. Possibly having 1 session after the 3 training sessions, just to sort of debrief and work through with Roger what would be most useful for us to scrutinise and what his report might look like. That may be too quick. In which case, we've got 2 other options. One is to look at governance or transport at our next deep dive session, which is where we're not marking the paperwork that's going to committee, which is what we've been doing today. We actually do that would people prefer to look at governance or transport for a deep dive if we can't do the climate and ecological things in that time? Governance. Okay, noted. I would be interested in any feedback from this meeting. How do we? That's the last thing on the agenda. It's something that Jeff has put on the audit committee meeting. So I'd just like to know how people feel this meeting has gone. And there's no obligation to say anything, but welcome constructive feedback.
Very quickly, can I thank the officers for their reports and their answers? I know sometimes I come across as a little fast in my questioning, but I do appreciate the answers.
As an ex-officer myself, I appreciate good questioning because it helps shine a mirror on what you're doing. And I think I'm seeing good nods all around here from the officers, but I would like to thank the officers, particularly the ones who waited very patiently at the back of the room for their few minutes of robust questioning. Any other feedback that we'd like to know? Okay. The only other feedback I'd like to give is I appreciate that some of these reports have clearly been written at pace and late in the day, not least because the government strangely keeps changing its mind or not giving us proper long-term funding settlements or whatever. But it would be good if we could have some sort of advanced preview of some of this paperwork, because I note that in the transformation programme, directors are now seeing the paperwork a couple of weeks out. I appreciate that's a difficult thing, and there may be some sensitive issues that we don't want to leak out, but anything that could be done to try and give us just a little bit more time than sort of Thursday at 10 o'clock in the evening for a Monday morning meeting would be appreciated. I don't expect, I know that's something you've been wrestling with, and I'm not expecting a comment right here and now, but I think it is an issue for us all. Okay, any last comments? No? Well, thank you all. And we ended up maybe accelerating a little bit too fast. We've finished a few minutes early.